Hello, and welcome to Historical Equestria, a seminar hosted by the Canterlot Archives to teach ponies about the various histories of our world. My name is SkyShadow. Some of you may already know me as one of the Royal Archivists here, as I've helped you find various books in the historical section. From today onward, I'll also be serving as the presenter of these seminars. I hope to meet with your approval. Before we begin today, I'd like to extend my thanks to Princess Twilight Sparkle for the donation of her former Canterlot apartments to the archives. Thanks to this generous gesture, Historical Equestria now has its own private library for its seminars. Now then, I'm certain you're all excited to get started on our latest topic. So let's begin, shall we? The subject of today's seminar is not equestrian history, but zebra history. Zebras are an equine species that, while not entirely common, can be found in many places all over the world. They are known for speaking in a lyrical dialect, and most have some knowledge of herbal medicines, or at least those with ties to their homeland. They are proud and respectful, and deserving of equal respect. You couldn't ask to have a better friend. Zebras are known for their stiff manes and unique black and white striping. These stripes come in a multitude of patterns, each one singularly unique to every zebra. No two zebras have exactly the same stripes, with perhaps the exception of twins. But even then, there are other markings and characteristics that define them as individuals. Also, while zebras do not have cutie marks, they have instead what is called a glyph mark. It is a tribal pattern or design emblazoned on their flanks, and like their stripes, no two glyph marks are alike. But where a pony's cutie mark will appear throughout the course of their youth via magic, a zebra earns their glyph mark through a coming-of-age ceremony. Their glyph mark is divined in dreams, and then, through the use of zebra herbal mixtures, the mark is permanently applied to their flanks. It's a tradition that's persisted throughout many centuries, even for those zebras without ties to their homeland. Unfortunately, there isn't much documentation about the nation's many tribal histories. Not for any lack of it, but in Zebrica, history is recorded through the oral tradition of storytelling. Being a storyteller is a demanding position, requiring one to memorize millennia of ancient tales and customs. Some they are willing to share and be recorded, while others have been lost by the wayside of history. It's a very admirable tradition, but as is the nature of stories, they tend to change with each new retelling, so it's difficult to know how accurate they are. Now, in regards to the home nation of the zebra peoples, we know it by the name of Zebrica, but its traditional name is actually Nyumbani. Furthermore, the nation is home to many more peoples than just the zebras. In fact, more than 50 tribes can tie their origins to the continent, including the elephants, the giraffes, and many of the great cat clans. Nyumbani is the largest continent in the known world today, and has origins dating back even before the Alicorn Kingdom of Equestria. We'll be focusing on the history of the zebra tribe in particular, but there is much more to be learned from the histories of Zebrica's other tribes as well. Before we begin, I'd like to apologize in advance for any mispronunciations I might make. I'm afraid I studied Kirinese as my foreign language. The continent can be divided into 5 different climate types. The Savannah, or Mbio Asili, the running lands, makes up one of the largest portions. It's a grassy expanse dotted with occasional watering holes and rivers and very few trees. At its heart is a singular mountain range, the Mama Milima, which is said to have been the birthplace of Zebrica's many different animal tribes. Separating the lands from each other is the Great Desert, Barabara Kifo. Unlike the desert of Saddle Arabia, the sands of the Death Road offer no relief. There is no water, no plant life, no insect or animal that can survive the massive expanse. There are a few designated crossroads for traveling safely between the many lands, but outside of them it's all too easy to lose one's way. Then there's the famous Valley of Rivers, Mito Bonde, where you can find the surviving architecture of the lost civilization of Kemet, the kingdom of the Sphinxes. Following the Valley of Rivers, there are the Ashen Plains. This is a long, dangerous expanse of heavy volcanic activity located atop an active fault line. Its name comes from the volcanic ash that periodically rains from the sky. Any water to be found is superheated, and the land's vegetation has become toxic to those from outside due to its long duration under volcanic fallout. Surprisingly, there is life to be found in such a place, though it's mostly primordial. Wyverns and other base dragons are among the known creatures, but they do not possess coherent intelligence. It is said that there is at least one language-speaking species, but they're almost never encountered, except in legend. Finally, the last climate is that of the jungles and the Great Forest of Webs, Msitu wa Mpandal, an enormous rainforest with countless flora and fauna where the zebras have gained many of their unusual medicines and herbs. It is also said that the jungle is home to a very mysterious race that no one has seen outside of high-ranking zebra shamans, known only by the name Anasai. There's a lot to be learned from each of these places, but as mentioned before, we'll be focusing on the history of the zebras in particular. The oral stories of the zebras originate from the Savannah. They say in their tales that the zebras came into the world after the foolishness of others had been spent, so their own foolishness was young. Of the many tribes that claim the Mother Mountains to be their birthplace, the zebras are actually one of the younger species. Before them came the giraffes, the elephants, the rhinoceros, the wildebeests and hyenas, and the tribe that would rule them all, the lions. When the tribes were young, there was strife and unease between them, most especially between the herbivores and carnivores. But the savannah was a vast land, not yet fully inhabited, and over time they found a balance that allowed them to live and interact in relative peace. It was when the younger species began emerging that real problems began to occur. With the lands of the older tribes firmly established, the new tribes had to find and make their own homes, learning how to survive and building their own running lands. Even though the savannah was enormous, there were still territorial disputes between them, mostly brought up by the younger and more prideful species. Surprisingly, the zebras were amongst the most active of these. In their beginnings, they were not the peaceful herbalists we have come to know them as, but an easily excitable and headstrong tribe. It was the lions who finally established order and balance between the tribes of the savannah. They were the strongest of the old tribes and shared alliances with their many brethren, such as the cheetahs and jaguars. They became the enforcing power behind the natural order, and as such dominated control of the running lands. At first, many of the species disagreed with this, and there was a good deal of initial resistance. But the lions had finally settled the chaotic unrest that divided the many tribes. Each had their lands and were free to govern themselves as they saw fit, so long as they respected the territories and persons of the other tribes. The lions would only involve themselves if disputes were unmanageable and got out of paw. And over time, the tribes began to appreciate the peace they had brought, however terse. The zebras, however, did not let go of their pride and resentment. From the early days of the lions' rule, they had voiced discontent, and they continued to do so even as the other tribes began to fall silent. Their protests rose to the point of outright rebellion, and they often clashed with decisions that were made in agreement between multiple tribes. The lions tolerated their outbursts only so much. The zebras were known to be a disruptive influence, and the two tribes made no efforts to hide their feelings towards one another. But it was the zebras who were the more radical in their views and protests, while the lions kept their clansmen under a very strict system of nobility, requiring they behave honorably at all times, regardless of their personal feelings. In short, the lions were letting the antagonistic zebras dig their own grave. Eventually, the zebras' protests took on physical retaliation, and there were open skirmishes with the lions. The tales portray multiple perspectives of this time, depending on which zebra tribe you speak to. Some say they were manipulated by another tribe, while others say it was the lions' own treatment towards them that caused the attacks. Others still say that it was because the chief of the zebras was going mad. Whatever the case, this turn in behavior eventually resulted in violence and even bloodshed. The zebras attempted to rally their tribal neighbors around them, but they refused. Under the lions' rule, they had at least achieved a semblance of order and relative peace. It wasn't perfect, but they weren't about to support the radical tribe preaching its end. And when the zebras rode out to strike at their foe, they rode alone. The zebra chieftain led their warriors in an attack on the lions' palace, but the lions were more than prepared for them. The zebra army was corralled by the wives of the king, the fiercest warriors of the tribe, and their forces succinctly crushed. In the aftermath, a summit was held between the many tribes of the Savannah to decide the fate of the zebra tribe survivors. Their army had been devastated, but they were still a very numerous tribe. And while the lions could very well have chosen to simply dispatch the rest of the tribe, it was ultimately decided that the zebras would be banished from the running lands. Of course, it can still be debated if this was truly a merciful choice. Cast out to walk the scorching sands of the death road, it seems just as likely that the tribe was being sent to their death. That's where today's seminar concludes. When we return, we'll be taking a look at what became of the zebra tribe following their banishment, and get a brief glimpse of the lost civilization of Kemet. I hope you all enjoyed today's history, and I look forward to seeing you again at the archives.
Howdy do there, folks. Nice to see you back after a hiatus. This year's NDK was hectic, to be sure, but well worth it in the end. And while I was away, check it out. We passed the 1,000 subscribers mark. Damn, kids. Keep this up and I'll be singing Winter Wrap-Up a lot sooner than I expected. Now, on to the info dump. To start, you'll notice our new background for the set. Sadly, this is not a result of the fan art contest. The contest was cancelled due to lack of submissions, and therefore the background you now see is one I've drawn. It took me a while to get the reference images I needed, that's for sure. In any case, it'll be Sky's new home until someone decides to send in something better. Next, the votes for the next history segment have been tallied, with an overwhelming number leaning towards the Changelings. So we'll be taking a look at their origins when the next series comes around. And in the in-between while I'm scripting it out, you folks will be getting a micro-series fanfiction reading. I've gotten a few recommendations, and I've already picked out what I'll be doing first. I gotta say though, I am impressed by the Brony fanfic community. There are some really great fic readings out there. Which means I'm gonna have my work cut out for me, especially if I plan on having guest voices. And coming up at the end of the month, we have RottleCon. Rest assured, I'm working on the special bid for Running of the Leaves Con, and it will air next month in place of the second Zebrica episode. What? I'm not falling behind or anything. This is clearly not a ploy to buy myself more time to finish the script. Anywho, thanks always for your support. And a special shout out to Bainesbloom for his fan art of the Overmare. Just look at that. That's an ideal recruiting poster there. Now, who wants to join my legions of darkness? Or rather, who doesn't?